I feel like in life we just got to do what we feel like is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm getting an error message. Hold on. It looks like the stream was deleted on your Facebook. Go live there and go live there. And hold on. I'm not sure what's going on. I know we're live. Give us a second. We got something going on the side over here, and I'm trying to fix it. I guess it's just not going in the Spray Wash Academy. I'm not really sure where all going at.
Did I do something wrong?
No, you didn't do anything wrong. It's
Right.
It's showing me that for some reason I'm not. Bear with us for a minute, everybody. I'm not sure why, but it's showing me on the back end that we are not going live on a lot of the areas that we're supposed to go live to. So I'm really not sure what's going on there. But anyhow, well, we'll just roll with it and see what happens. How's that? So, hey there, hi there, ho there out in Spray Wash Land, even though we're not apparently not where we're supposed to be, but we're there. So that's good enough for me, right? We'll just roll with it. So anyhow, tonight we're going to be talking with Trevor Shamblin, and we're going to talk a lot about pure water cleaning, all that kind of fun stuff. And he and I just got back from the PWNA convention down in Glendale, Arizona. And so a couple things, a couple reasons. Hey there. So a couple of reasons why I wanted to have him on was because we were talking at the convention about pure water, and he mentioned a few things. And I don't think that I don't know if most people, because I did talk to somebody and they said, well, he designs those because are you designing all of the pure water systems for the Power Wash store?
Yeah, Paul and I have designed pretty much everything that they're offering. It's kind of a collaboration between Paul and I. I came in with the knowledge of how pure water works and some manufacturing, ability. But Paul has more of the manufacturing background than I do. So between the two of us, my knowledge of water filtration, his knowledge of fabrication, was a pretty good combination. We were able to come out with some pretty outstanding equipment.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a couple different levels of filtration as far as volume. And we have some pole systems, a residential pole that's about a 30-footer, and then a 45-foot that you can get extensions to go 55 and 65 feet. So pretty much anything, up to like 5-6 stories. I had a set of custom poles made for me that'll go up to 75.
I saw that. You're talking about the two 10-foot extensions on there?
Well, yeah, it was it's a 45, and then I had two 15-foot extensions made, so it's 75-foot total. And it's a pretty big, pretty tall pole. So it gets up there.
It's up there, yeah.
Yeah.
So you and I were talking about pure water and some things I didn't realize. Like I know with my RODI machine, I drank some of the water out of it. And not really realizing that it could be a problem. And I sat back and I was thinking about it after you and I were talking, and I do seem to remember having like a stomach ache or something after that, but it never really registered. I didn't really think about it. Right. So let's talk a little bit about, again, pure water, why pure water works. And so I don't think, and I think you'll agree, that there's no way that pure water is ever going to replace somebody that has, somebody doing the job with the squeegee. But you were also saying something else. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that, but so let's talk about the pure water and why you feel like, or why like as an example, that I may have gotten a stomachache.
Yeah. So the reason why you don't want to drink pure water. When I say pure water, I'm not talking about close to pure water. I'm talking about with a TDS of 0. So when your water gets to that point where it's totally pure, water becomes negatively charged. So basically, the idea is water wants to be dirty. Um, that's when it's comfortable, is when it's dirty. It wants to be contaminated with things. It's constantly trying to fill itself and essentially become lazy. That's kind of the way that I describe it. When you purify water, it becomes negatively charged. It wants to be contaminated, so it gets angry and it's trying to find things to dirty itself. So it becomes essentially a great worker. Like it becomes motivated to dirty itself. So when you use pure water to clean, instead of just using it as a flush, it's actually physically grabbing and trying to pull contaminants off of surfaces to dirty itself.
because it
Um,
needs
yeah,
or wants to.
and how that can, on the other end, how that can affect your cleaning when your water is dirty, is that, let's say your TDS, like we were just in Arizona. Okay, so the average TDS readings in Arizona are about 600, and in some places they get up, 8, 900. I had one customer that had well over 1,000 TDS in their water. And the way that affects your cleaning is that water is essentially the most lazy employee you've ever had. Okay, it's totally full. It has barely any room to hold any more contaminants. So at that point, it's really just doing the bare minimum of work. Now, versus purified water, if you put purified water next to it, that water would be angry. Okay, so purified water is also semi-corrosive. That's why if you're using purified water in cleaning your pressure washing equipment or anything else, you don't want to leave that water sitting in your pump for extended periods of time, because it will actually rust the inside of your pumps if you let it sit in there for long periods of time. So when that water is pure, it's actively always trying to grab and contaminate itself. So that's why we like to use it for cleaning, because it helps clean because it's trying to dirty itself. So
Right, right.
it's mimicking a lot of the things that like detergents and soaps will do, but with just water. So when you combine that with solutions, detergents, degreasers, it like supercharges it. So like, for instance, this is a good example. They've been using purified water in fleet washing for a pretty long time. So
Mhm.
you can save a dramatic amount of money in chemical costs just by purifying your water. Um, you can talk to people that in their area they run TDS of like 100. Okay, and you find out like how much soap and acid they're using for two-stepping or fleet washing of the same product, compared to somebody that, let's say, they're in an area like Arizona where their TDS is like 600. If you were to compare the two and the performance of those two, the same product, but just in an area where the water is completely different, you're going to see a dramatic change in how much soap and acid they have to use to get the same results.
Mhm.
And that's with 100 TDS and versus 600. Now it's even more dramatic if you're using purified water, because at that point your water is doing a lot of the work, so you don't have to rely as much on your soap and your acids and the other chemicals that you're using. So besides getting a much better end result and also having spot-free cleaning, you're going to use less chemical and your results are going to be dramatically better.
So, do you think it's, from what I'm understanding, and I guess Nicholas Collins is listening, maybe not watching, but anyhow, so you think it's beneficial then to um, run RO water over just a standard whatever water that you're doing, and you think that even the cost of the filters and all that is you're going to save enough money over a standard cleaning, let's say,
Yeah,
than
generally, yeah, you're going to save more money with the chemical, as long as you're using the right kind of filtration for the type of area that you're in. So, like, if you were just trying to clean your water with DI resin only, and you're in an area where the TDS readings are high, you would burn through DI resin at an alarming rate, and it wouldn't be cost effective. So that's where we do a combination of RO DI water,
Mm-hmm.
where the RO filter is doing the majority of the work, and then we're just relying on the resin to polish out or take out those last bit of contaminants that the first. Well, it's not really the first stage, but the first stage of filters that actually make a difference on TDS. So whatever that filter doesn't cover, the DI covers, because the RO generally takes out about 90% of the contaminants, but those filters last for a long, long time compared to just a DI. So those filters are about 90% efficient, but they will absorb a ton amount of contaminants. Now, DI will do about 100% of contaminants, but it'll only absorb a small amount compared to the RO filters. So when we do filtration from the majority of the nation, we usually try and utilize RO and DI to try and get the water numbers down. Now, in the past, we were kind of limited on being able to filter water in high volume in a mobile application. Just generally
You've really
because,
changed that.
yeah, we dramatically changed that a couple years ago. The first system that I designed was the Little Beast system that we got like I think it was like 2.5 or 3 gallons a minute out of that system, which was not common. Most RODI systems that were mobile in our industry were generally between 3/4 to a gallon per minute, which is not enough to keep up with fleet washing or building washing or anything to that nature. That now we have systems that'll do 4, 5, 6 gallons a minute, and then we have systems that we use for fleet washing where they have multiple applicators working at the same time, where we can get 9 or 10 gallons a minute out of a mobile unit. And we have people using that for fleet washing. A lot of the drone operators are using our systems to make purified water for drone cleaning, building washing, solar panels. Solar panels is a huge one because we're able to produce, anywhere from 5 to 10 gallons a minute on remote in the middle of nowhere to run, things like drones and robots, rotary brushes, all those things. And we're not having to use any kind of chemical or anything. You can use chemical, like you can wash buildings with soft washing, everything with pure water, and it's just going to make it to where you don't have to use as much chemical. You can, dial your chemical back because again, instead of just using the water as a flushing agent, we're actually using the water now as more of a cleaning agent. Yeah, so we're getting, instead of just having the water as a carrying agent, and then our surfactants and the other chemicals that we're using to clean, we're adding in the ability of the water to be more of a cleaning agent than just a flushing agent. And so where before, when we're using really dirty water, and when I say dirty water, I'm not talking about physically dirty water. I'm talking about the TDS readings.
The TDS.
Yeah, so we're getting
And
much better results.
TDS is total dissolved solids.
Yeah.
So real quick, let's answer this question. Your servant is asking, if I start offering window cleaning, will this likely required indoor window cleaning likely be required for indoor cleaning as well?
No, and I hear that a lot. A lot of guys that the convention that we just had, that was one of the questions that came up when I was talking to people, and they were thinking about adding window cleaning in their business. They're like, I really don't want to go in their house. I don't want to do interior. Like, if I start doing a water fed pole on the outside, does that mean I have to learn to do the inside? No, you don't. We do house washing and building washing, and really, it's about 100%. We do exterior windows on pretty much every job that we do. At this point, it's not even an option. Put it into every estimate. If you get a house wash or a building wash, window cleaning is included in the price, and you have to actually ask for it not to be there.
Right.
And we don't really do interior windows. I probably do interior maybe 2 or 3% of the time.
Wow.
And I just sub it out to another window cleaner that I know that's local, because we just don't have the time. And I don't really want myself or my guys going into a house after we've been,
Reliability.
outside pressure washing, which makes sense. Like it just doesn't. It's not a good idea to go in somebody's house after. So generally, no, you don't have to. Don't offer it if they do ask. If it's worth it, you know, hook up with a local window cleaner maybe that can come in and do the interior windows when you're done. But the majority of the time, people are just happy to have their outsides because they're like, oh, I can do my insides myself, and it's like, okay. So we don't push it. When they ask for it, we'll offer it, but it's really not that often.
All right. So Randy the Beaston says Trevor Shamblin is the king of pure water. He is amazing, and he's got sexy legs, kind of
Randy.
like Craig Harrison did there at the show. So anyhow, heavyweight dancer saying recently hooked up. I think he's meaning activated carbon.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think he's. So thoughts?
So activated carbon helps with some things, but it doesn't really do much for your TDS readings. Carbon will remove things like bleach from the water, so from like city water, it'll remove bleach. It'll work as a basic sediment filter, so it'll remove like sand and rust and some of those other things. And it can remove
really
some things
for those TDS.
Yeah, and it'll remove some metals from the water, and it'll help keep your pumps from getting tips from getting clogged because it will stop like debris and stuff. But it's not going to really lower TDS readings. But you will need to use a carbon filter if you're going to use a RO filter because the chlorine or chloramine in some areas can destroy your RO filter. So I would recommend anybody running some level of filtration, whether it's a sediment filter or running a carbon block filter to their tanks. It helps, and they're cheap filters. I mean, you can get a housing for a 4.5 by 10 or a 2.5 by 10 for $30, and the filters change them out are anywhere from $8 to $20, and they'll last you a couple months. It's cheap insurance, but it's not going to dramatically lower your TDS readings to make it to where you're going to see a big difference in your performance of your water. But it can help you with some other things.
Will pure water make Jacob prettier?
That's asking a lot.
That's asking a lot.
I mean, maybe clean that dirty window, the dirty mirror. But we'll only want to find out.
Good evening, folks. I studied a little about this when I was involved with Kagan water, ashline inside, acidic outside. Alkaline inside, acidic outside.
Kagan water. Okay. I'm not really sure what that is in reference to.
I think that's a company of some sort.
Okay.
Not 100% positive on that one, Michael. Heavyweight dancer. Recently, I hooked up 1 activated carbon and 2 DI tanks, all 3.7 cubic feet. Plan is to use it to clean my soft wash setup, 10 GPM, but have so far only used it for water-fed poles. My TDS is about 60.
Yeah, at a TDS of 60, using just DI, that's within range. Yeah, you'd be good. I mean, you're gonna change out your filters like anybody else would if their water content was higher. But it's definitely cost effective at that point. I do know a lot of people that do run an RO even when they have a TDS reading of under 100, just so they can have more longevity on their filters and not have to change them out as long. But that's one of those spots where having a TDS of 60, you don't have to have RO at that point. It's an option, but it's not. You don't have to have it to be cost effective. Now, if you're in a TDS of over 100 to 150, absolutely, 100%. You need more than just DI, especially if you're going to be doing like fleet washing or any kind of high volume washing, like windows and stuff like that. Would be okay. Solar would be more than fine. With solar, you don't have to have a TDS reading of 0 in order to get good work. Now, it will aid in the cleaning, but to not get spotting and everything on solar, you generally want TDS readings of bare minimum of 50. I like comfortable range for me is like a 30 to 40.
Hmm.
But it's acceptable in those numbers.
Hmm. So, and that's something else we were talking about at the convention is that, a lot of these solar panels and even a lot of the new windows that they're coming out with now are a no touch surface. And so they're not wanting you to use well, it kind of went into agitation, but not necessarily brushing. What do you know about that side of it?
That's a very new thing to the industry. I'm kind of curious about how that's
How
going
that's
to
going to
go. I
work
was
out?
talking to some of the drone operators, and we were kind of talking about that because they're doing essentially they're cleaning buildings and windows without touching them,
Hmm.
and they're getting pretty good results from cleaning windows with just spraying them and not agitating. I mean, of course, they're not going to get
Right.
perfect, but they said they are seeing results that are acceptable to customers. Now, whether
Or,
depends on the customer, but there's going to be things I think in the future that are going to make the results of a no-touch window cleaning better. And
right. That's
chances
what I
are
think.
one of those things is going to be advancements in chemicals. I think that with combination between purified water um, and some specialized chemicals that or solutions or detergents that would help aid with cleaning the windows without having to actually touch them.
Mhm.
It's going to be something in the near future. So yeah,
Right.
we might see window cleaning going touchless, especially in high rises and things like that with the drone technology that we're seeing now.
Mhm.
I think that's a very viable option in the future. Like once we do some more development, and I was speaking with um, some of the people from the drone companies, and that's something
Mhm.
they're actively working on right now. So kind of
Right, yeah,
curious to
so
see what.
and that's all part of it where,
Yeah.
you start looking at some of that. I don't personally believe that you will ever have I mean, chemically wise, though, maybe eventually, but right now you're not going to get an absolutely perfect cleaning on the windows if you don't manually
That's
touch it
okay.
with the plumbing, right? Right,
Yeah.
without some sort of agitation. But they are getting to the point where it's more than acceptable, right? Because to me, I look
Yeah.
at it, something that's acceptable is, yeah, it's acceptable, right? So you want
Yeah.
something that's better than just acceptable, and I think that they're obtaining that now. And you've got products like EBC Glide, from
Hmm.
Carlos Gonzalez, that kind of stuff that is helping with that, that aspect of it to where you don't need that agitation. And we were talking with on the drone side of it where maybe that first initial cleaning, and this is where you do your upsells, or you go in and you do some traditional cleaning, whether it's water fed poles or and I guess up that's not going to necessarily be the case because you're going to be talking higher than what the water fed pole is pretty much going to be doing. And then you can come back and you can use a drone on the follow up cleanings and doing them more often and still be in that same price range as if they let it go a year or 2 years, that kind of a thing. So,
Yeah, I think we're going to see really good results if uh, we do a non-touch free cleaning first, and then just keep up on maintenance cleanings after. I think that is going to be the future for drone cleaning. I think the initial cleaning is probably going to have to be manual,
yeah,
and as long as they follow up with cleanings, routinely after that, I think that we're going to get results that I think people are going to be happy with.
yeah,
Uh, and
exactly.
we'll figure out if we're a year out from that or 2 years out from that. But I don't think we're that far, especially with how fast drone cleaning is growing right now.
Hmm.
Um, 2 years ago, if you have asked me that if drone cleaning was going to be as forward as it is right now, I would say no.
Yeah, same
But
here.
it has. They've sold. I've seen you know the sales of those things skyrocket over the past year.
Hmm.
Um, I know a couple guys that have them, and they seem very very happy with them,
Hmm.
especially with the advancement that they've had just in the past year,
Right.
which I think is more than probably what they were expecting.
Mhm.
So I'm curious to see what we're going to see in the next year or two from drones.
Yeah, same here.
It's a pretty interesting thing. We had two companies out at our convention
Mhm.
that demos, and it was the first time I've seen them in person
Mhm.
operate. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah,
So
so, both that was Lucid and Apelix that flew,
mhm,
and, the funny part about that, and that's I know this is not what this one's about, but, the funny part about that is that building, the area that they were spraying on, I would have before the convention, I would have said I would bring a lift in because
mhm.
it's
Oh
too
yeah,
good of access, right? There's no reason for a drone in that case. But sitting there watching it and how quick it was actually able to apply, that kind of a thing. I thought, you know what, I'm actually wrong. I think if it would be faster if I had the drone here because I don't have to move the you know the lift, and
yeah.
not only that, but you're over here, but now you got to boom up, boom down, move around, so those sorts of things you just don't have to do. So, I'm going to be exploring some of those things and trying to answer some of those questions over the next few months. But so Michael J says, in Japan, controlled pH water is used in medicine and cleaning. I
Hmm.
think that's what he was referring to before too. So,
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
and then
absolutely.
Ryan is saying, my little beast rocks.
I
You
think
know,
got one of our.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
The funny thing about it is, so the little beast, right? I had one,
Mhm.
and it left white haze all over the windows. Did you know that?
The the filter system did.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh,
So
why
the
did?
system that you put out was leaving
Uh
white haze. So you should tell people to remove the so it there was something inside that was causing that to happen. It was
What was
because
inside?
the customer called we you said a customer called up. There's a white haze all over the windows. Well, one of the guys had changed out the filter, and for some reason he left a bolt or two or something inside of it. And so
Uh,
it wasn't until we were changing out the filters and we were like, yeah, and they were still in the plastic bag. They were. I don't even know what the heck the deal was, but they were bolts for. I think we had thinking back, like we broke a piece off and we had to
uh,
make it so. How why they were in there? Because how do you even get them in there? But they were in there, and yeah, it lleft a white haze all over it.
that's where were the bolts rusted?
No, they weren't. They were that well they were
Hmm.
because they were stainless steel bolts, but they were
Oh, okay.
um, very white and hazy, and that's what was on the
Okay,
windows.
well, that makes sense. I
Yeah,
was gonna say, I was like, it shouldn't be doing that, but yeah, that makes sense. If it was, if you had bolts in the filter, yeah, that could
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
And when I say bolts, I mean they're for lack of a better word, they're screws, right? They weren't,
Mhm.
and I think they were for holding the mounting of the filter onto. I don't remember, but I think they were for that purpose. So
Oh, okay. All right, that makes sense then.
anyhow, let's see. Michael J. Solar is all we use the RO system for, besides larger commercial projects.
Good.
And then here's somebody else piping in and saying, glide from Carlos Gonzalez works great. And yes, it definitely does. Um, and then drones seem to be way more efficient. Yeah, we're going to learn a lot about drones over the next several months and several years. My prediction for them, honestly, is that you know, they're going to take off. But I think they're only going to take off for about a year, year and a half. Then they'll plateau out and then they'll drop down a little bit. You'll start seeing used ones on the market and then they'll level out from there. And I don't necessarily believe that you're going to have, 30 different drone companies per city. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think it needs to happen for the most part, but I think you're going to see, you know, 5 or 6 established companies in all the major areas that are going to be knocking some, especially as I'm
Yeah,
leaning more towards what they're going to end up doing. But
yeah. The
so,
problem with the drone cleaning is that it has to be it has to go in the hands of the right person.
right.
And I was talking to some people at the convention that were, talking about getting a drone and hearing kind of their ideas of their business after. And I think that this is unfortunately one of those things where I think a lot of people are going to think, oh, I can just buy a drone and then I'm going to have these huge building jobs just lining up. And it's like, yeah, it'll make the job easier, but you still have to go out and make the connections and actually get the jobs. And I've seen that with a couple fads in the industry where people buy really expensive equipment or new equipment, and they have this feeling like, I'm going to buy it and then things are just going to blow up, but they forget that you actually have to do the groundwork and actually
Yeah.
do something with that equipment in order to get it out working.
Well,
So the guys that I know that I've spoken with that are already doing that type of work, that, I mean, they're going to take off.
yeah.
Because it's going to make them dramatically more efficient. I mean, safety wise, is probably the biggest thing, is that you're keeping your people on the ground, you're keeping them out of lifts, and you can cut down the amount of labor. I mean, like when
Right.
they did the demo at the convention. I mean, I was running the pressure washer for the demo, and then the guy that was flying it, and that's all we really needed. I mean, we could literally wash an entire, convention center with maybe, 2 or 3 people at the
Right.
most, and the other, 1 or 2 of those people would be literally just doing crowd control and, moving cones around.
Yeah,
Versus,
the only thing I would like to see, and Apelix had it. Apelix had that the piece on the ground, the actuator on the ground, where they could shut the flow of water off,
Mhm.
from there. And so, if you have something that has a control wizard or whatever, I think that's kind of a better way to go. But the one thing I didn't like on that whole demo side of it, and I don't know if it was really thought out correctly. I get it because they're trying to show how user friendly the drones are, but so the first one to fly was Apelix, and then the second, or excuse me, was Lucid, and then Apelix, and Lucid had their drone flying. They turned around, they said, "Hey, is there anybody here that wants to fly it?" Now I think they did ask, if you've had drone experience before, but part of it is, to me, some of the controllers work in the opposite direction, so having somebody
uh,
at random jump out and while the bird's already in the air and that kind of thing without any instruction, I thought was, yeah, it's not something I would have done. And then Apelix kind of doubled down with allowing them to do the same thing, but then had the kid come up. He was like probably 12 years old or something, and he
mhm.
took over the control. So luckily everything went great. I don't know that I would have done that, because I would be like, I would want to know that you've at least had that instructional training on the ground to make sure which way those controls go and all that kind of thing. But I get it, and it did prove that they're stable and that anybody could fly them. They're not that difficult to fly. Especially, I think that one of the things that I noticed in the training, and this wasn't supposed to be about drones, but one of the things that I noticed in training is flying the smaller drones is a lot more difficult than flying the larger drones because they don't move as fast. They're visually, better, if you
Yeah,
will.
I,
I think so.
I did kind of notice that when they were flying the drones, that they don't move quite like the small ones do. The small ones make very, quick movements. Yeah, where I could see it could be a little overwhelming to try and control, because I think it's just the physical size of them
Hmm.
uh, just make it harder to control. Whereas the bigger ones, I mean, they don't move slow, but it's not as dramatic as far as the speed goes, and you can visually see them a little better. So it's probably, the bigger they get, the probably the easier they are to handle, which
Right.
you would think it would kind of be the opposite, but it did seem from when I was sitting that
Easier to
it
handle, yeah.
seems like they're a little easier to control. So if
Mhm.
you have one at home, like a, you know cheap little Walmart one or something you got from Costco, or even a semi-professional one, that it looks like those big drones are actually easier to control than the little tiny ones.
Right. Right. So, getting back onto the water side of things, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before. So, TDS, total dissolved solids, it's because of all the stuff and contaminants that are in the water. But let's get into what is truly the difference between RO and DI, and um, is there an advantage to just using RO? Is there an advantage to using just DI? And now we can even throw the carbon in there. What are your thoughts on some of that, if you can?
Um, so I'll talk about the first 2 stages first. So generally we have like a sediment filter, and then a carbon block filter. So the sediment filter is going to remove things like sand, gravel, you know, big pieces of stuff, rust. The carbon block filter is going to remove the thing that we're really trying to remove with the carbon filter that's really important is bleach. So like the bleach that we get in our ground or our city water.
Right. You're not talking about the bleach that we're spraying. You're talking about the bleach that's
I'm just talking about the bleach that's in our water for disinfection. Just so like the water that we drink is drinkable.
Right.
So we need to remove that when we're using an RO system. Now DI can handle a certain amount of bleach and it doesn't affect it. Now it's the RO filter that we have to protect from sodium hypochlorite or bleach. The main difference between an RO and a DI filter, RO is reverse osmosis. So that filter is those long tubes generally. And like I said before, those filters remove around 9% of the contaminants in water. They're not 100% efficient, but they can carry more contaminants for the volume of the filter compared to a DI. The one negative to an RO filter is it dramatically cuts down on flow. So if we're putting, 5 gallons or 6 gallons per minute of tap pressured water from like a house or a building through an RO filter, it's going to restrict that down to about 3/4 of a gallon per minute for most RO filters that are made for our industry. There's different levels and different types where they take a lot more pressure to flow, but the ones that we use in our industry will cut that water flow down to about 3/4 of a gallon per minute, which makes it really inefficient for producing large amounts of water.
Right.
That's why a lot of people utilize DIs because there's almost no flow restriction at all. So if you're putting 5 or 6 gallons per minute into a DI filter, you're going to get pretty much that out of it. And those filters generally, when they're new, when they're in their they're still they're not depleted, they'll remove about 99 to 100% of the contaminants in the water. But the life efficiency of of RO is dramatically less. They won't take up as much contaminants as an RO filter. The DI filter takes up a smaller amount, so it depletes faster. So that's kind of why we utilize both of those together, so we can get the longevity of the RO filter that will take out 90%, and then we rely on the DI to do that last bit of polishing to take out the rest of the contaminants. Sometimes you can get away with using just an RO filter and not even using a DI if your starting water is low enough. So like if you do have a TDS reading, let's say you're at 100. So that means your filtration, your TDS number after that RO filter is going to be about a 10, which is soft water. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close to perfect. And you will get really good results out of that. Spotting is that's kind of on the borderline of where you're going to see spotting and not spotting. Glass, you'll probably see possibly some spotting. If you're talking about like auto finishes, you probably won't. Solar panels, you won't. Just anything that you're having to actually physically look through, like a window, you'll see spotting, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So in those cases, you wouldn't have DI if you didn't want to. But if we're in higher readings where you're starting off at 200 or something, that you definitely have to use a DI filter after if you wanted to get those numbers down to where you won't see spotting.
Right.
So yeah, it just depends on what your starting water is and what you're doing with it. Like for some people that are doing solar panels, having just an RO and no DI will work. And you can actually we at one of our systems, you can bypass the DI filter so you don't deplete it if you don't need it. Because there's some parts of the country where your TDS readings can vary, just by 5 miles. You can catch water in one spot and it's 60 or 80, and then you can go 20 or 30 miles and you have TDS of 200 or 300. So it gives you the ability to adjust the system to fit your needs with the area that you're in.
So, how often do you have to change out the RO filters, the DI filters, and what's the cost of like each one?
The RO filters, I mean, this is going to depend greatly on one, how often you're using it, and how bad your water is to start with. And so we go through, let's see, about an RO filter every year and a half, and our TDS readings are around 150. And again, like I said, we do window cleaning on every house wash and building wash that we do. We do solar, so we do run a pretty good amount of water through that filter. We're in about a year and a half out of that, and then the DI change probably every month, 2 months. I usually try once I see it rising past 6 is when I just change it out because it's going to gradually get worse and worse. And once it's past 10, that's definitely when it needs to be changed. So once we see the number running up around 6 consistently, that's when I usually like to change them out.
And there's no like back flushing of those, I assume.
No, there's no back flushing on those. Back flushing is something that you would do on a salt system, like on a house or an industrial facility. But the type of filtration system that we use don't use salt. Now for the RO, there is a flush valve that you open that helps clear out the contaminants from that filter that help it last longer. But that's easy. You just open up a little valve on it with a pump running, or if you're using tap pressure. And I usually tell people to leave that valve open when you're done with your work. So once you're finished, go back to your car, to your truck, or wherever you have your system mounted, open up that line and let the water flush through while you're putting your stuff away. And you want to usually let it run for at least a minute or two or even longer, and then turn your system off and just leave it open.
Just like
that way just leave it open. That way when you start work the next time, it'll start with it open, so it can flush it out again. Now you might think, well, why are we going to flush it out again? We just flushed it the last time we used it. It shouldn't need to be flushed again. Well, that filter is riding in the back of the truck and bouncing around, and some of those contaminants in that drive or that amount of time will break loose. So it's a good opportunity to basically flush out whatever is knocked loose since the last time you cleaned it. And you can see that by just testing the water that comes out of there. You can use a TDS meter and check the water that's coming out, and you can see how bad it is compared to after it runs for a couple minutes, and you'll see a difference. So transporting your system from one place to another will knock out contaminants, and you should take that opportunity to clean your filters out and make them last longer.
Right. So have you done any experimenting with, do you know what diatomaceous earth is?
No, not really. I've heard of them. I haven't really done very much research with them because there's a lot of different types of filtration. It just hasn't it's not something I've gotten into yet.
Diatomaceous earth is, it's a good product. Like, you can use diatomaceous earth for even insect control and things like that. So I guess the best way for me that it's stuck into my head is that think about asbestos. Okay. What's the problem with asbestos? Asbestos has these little fibers that hook in to your lungs and get stuck there, right? That's where asbestosis comes from. And diatomaceous earth is kind of the same way, where it gets onto the skin of the animals, like silverfish, the little silverfish things and all that kind of stuff, and it dries them out, so they can't survive it. So you can spread that around and that kind of thing. So, but it's a pretty fine powder, kind of a thing. So that would be interesting, and never really thought about that as well. Michael J. also says, and I'll address this just real quick, on taller buildings with drones, could you do a roof launch as a percentage of the weight of the hose would be hanging? Yes, you could. And those are a few of the things that we're looking at, as well as actually having a boom on the roof that lifts the hose up as you go to allow you to get higher, because a lot of it is about the weight. So Heidi King says, yes, we have one. It's awesome. I'm not sure what she's talking about in that part of the conversation. It could have been the giant
filter or the drone.
Maybe, maybe she's talking about the diatomaceous earth filter. Heidi, if you could enlighten us on that, that would be great. So, and Michael J is saying it's about the carcinogens. So,
yeah, so carcinogens is one of the things that will come out from filters. Depending on the type, I mean, there's tons and tons and tons, but for our industry, carcinogens don't really have a dramatic effect on window cleaning, and that's more of a thing when it comes to drinking water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So so I don't think what do you think the cost of the different filters is?
Oh, so
backing up real quick, we had talked about, is it cost effective to use the RODI water? And, you're saying the one filter lasts a year and a half ish. So that would definitely make it worth it, kind of a thing. But what would those costs of those filters be, typically speaking? Because the different areas are going to be different.
Yeah, the RO filter is the most expensive filter. They're around $300.
Mm-hmm. But that's the one you replace every year and a half.
Yeah, you replace every year and a half. I mean, that filter is going to make you a ton of money before you have to change it. It's more than worth it. The first two stages of filters, if you're using a 4-stage, is your carbon and sediment, and there's a wide variety of different sizes with those filters. Mm-hmm. Whereas the smaller ones going for, I mean, you can buy them in bulk for probably $5 a piece, $6 a piece. And then when you get to the larger sizes where they're 4.5 by 10, or some of our real high flow systems where it's a 4.5 by 20 filter, those ones can go in the range of like $30 to $50, depending on the style or the type or brand, and those will last a pretty good amount of time. I mean, those bigger filters can filter out a ton of water. Mm-hmm. And then the last filter that we have is the DI. Which depends on if you're going to use cartridges to replace. They go, I haven't bought a cartridge in a while because we refill ours, which is the better option to do. Mm-hmm. The filters that we use for our systems are refillable. There's a lot of systems out there where they're filters you have to buy from the manufacturer that you purchase them from, or they're in a style of filter that is kind of dramatically more expensive than what the canisters or refillable canisters cost. So that's kind of why we use them, because they're just more cost effective. But you can get those for $40 to $50 if you want to buy one. If you want to buy a bulk bag of resin and refill them, I think you can probably refill them for maybe $20 or something like that, depending on where you get it from, the quality of the resin. But it's pretty cost effective. It's really not that bad. Now, it's not cost effective if you're using DI only and you're in an area where the TDS readings are high, because you're going to be burning through resin so fast that it's not going to be cost effective. And that's usually when we try and steer people to a RO DI system. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, even if you bought DI filters and at some point you figure out that I need more than that, I need an RO system, you can generally utilize those filters that you first got, and we can just you can get an RO only system. Well, with the other stages before, so be your carbon, sediment, and then your RO, and then we can probably reuse your DI filter if it's big enough. Mm-hmm. So it won't be a total waste.
So since you're doing a lot of, is most of your cleaning that you do residential or commercial? Because you're mostly commercial, right? I think you're about 50-50.
We were right now we're mostly commercial and industrial cleaning. We still do residential, but it's mostly just to kind of fill in the calendar between commercial and industrial jobs. So yeah, we still do residential. Like sometimes we'll do, a week or week and a half of just residential stuff for the most part, with a couple industrial or commercial things thrown in. And then sometimes we'll go, a month without doing a single residential job. It just depends. But we're transitioning more and more into just doing commercial and industrial, and we're kind of working our way out of the residential game at the moment.
So would you say that you can do as good of a job or better job or not as good of a job if you do, like water fed pole versus just a squeegee?
I think you can do as close to as good. Like I said, also it depends on who's doing the traditional
Right, right.
work. Now, if you're talking about an average, an average traditional window cleaner versus an average water fed pole operator, I would say, it's going to be almost as good. But it also depends on what the windows are starting off as. Like if the windows have been maintenance and they've been cleaned from time to time, then yeah, that the difference is going to be much smaller.
Yeah.
And now, if you're talking about windows that have been, sitting on a house for 25 years, and then somebody's like, "Hey, I'm going to have my windows cleaned," yeah, it's not going to be as good. It's going to be a more dramatic difference, but and it's going to save you a lot of time to do it.
We had one where
water fed.
The client had I think it was a generator, if I'm not mistaken, a whole building generator. So you think about that. I mean, this was I want to say it was a 5-story and massive building, right? And so they had a generator that would supply power to this building in the event of a power outage. So we're not talking about a little teeny tiny generator, right?
Yeah.
And this thing, the exhaust stack, just totally coated the entire. So I think the first 3 stories on that where that was at did not have windows, if I'm remembering correctly, and then the 4th and 5th had windows, and they were just completely coated with not just soot but other kind of contaminants from it. And I mean, and not only that, but we would have had to have had a lift to get in there to even contemplate doing anything, because the generator plus the fencing around it. I mean, there was just no way to even cover it with a pole or anything like that. I mean, point being, I mean, we tried virtually everything because we were able to get our pole on a part of it, but we tried everything, other than getting the lift because they didn't want to pay for it and getting up there and restoring it. And we got virtually nowhere with that. So there are things, no matter what you do, they're going to require hands-on. I don't know that we could have, because we did try some different things. I was really kind of playing around because I tried degreasers, I tried some one restore, I tried some oxidation removal stuff. I mean, I tried all kinds of stuff just because I wanted to see what would happen, and I knew that I couldn't damage the window. There's nothing I was going to do to that window, as far as that's concerned. So definitely there's going to be those kinds of times. So if it were a traditional storefront, do you feel like the water fed is a better option than a traditional, or maybe on follow-up cleanings? Or because I'm curious about that because of what we were talking about earlier.
It can be, depending on a couple of factors. One, how your system is set up. If you have a system where it's literally a cart that you have to pull out of the back of a truck and then hook up a hose to the building, and, go through that, where
I think we might have just lost Trevor.
Are we still on?
Yep, there you are. You're back.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you. Go ahead.
All right. Have to be a hard project, at least harder than what the storefront would generally be, or save time. Set up and break time, that equipment wouldn't be efficient.
I don't know. I think your connection is because you've
which
had
is
some
a
spotty
mounted
connection.
system. Like you mount and you put a hose reel on top of it, and it's actually plumbed, and you're using a remote where you can turn your pump on off, and you just have to pull the line out of the truck.
I kind of felt like that was going to happen. I didn't do it to you, Trevor. Trevor just was he
Matter
was
of
there. He is. He's coming back.
Where'd you? I think you didn't hear any of that. Where'd you lose me at?
I'm not sure. We weren't really. I don't know if anybody else was hearing, but I wasn't hearing much of anything. And then all of a sudden we were gone. So, but yeah, so I'm not sure. Virtually that whole thing was null and void.
I think it's resetting.
Yeah. No,
okay, I think
we're right at about an hour anyhow, Trev.
I think it's going to be better. I can finish this last thought real quick. Sure. All right. So when it comes down to efficiency, it depends on your equipment. So if you're using a traditional cart, which is old technology, it still works. I think there's a lot better options. Like our mounted systems work, I think, dramatically better and they're more efficient because you're not having to take a cart out, set it up, take a water line, unhook your pressure washer, then hook up a water line to your filter system, and then take your other hose rod, your lines, lined out, everything. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of time. Having a mounted system on your truck or your trailer with a hose reel, where you just pull line out like for your pressure washer and connect it to your water fed pole, and just turn on a switch, because we try and talk customers into running a line to their buffer tank and then using our pump system to utilize a remote. And that's the most efficient, because when you're done pressure washing, you just leave your hose hooked up and your filtration system is pulling water from your tank. You're literally just pulling your water fed pole hose off of your reel that's mounted to your truck, and you pull it to your areas, plug it into your pole and start working. In that instance, yeah, it could be dramatically quicker. Mm-hmm. If you have it set up that way. Now, if you're doing a ton of windows, it's even quicker. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're talking about the storefront is like 3 or 4 or 5 windows or something like that, then not gonna be worth it. No, most traditional guys are going to be can knock that out in a couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're somebody that's not efficient at traditional, you're going to be much faster with a water fed pole. Mm-hmm. And if it's a reoccurring account, the windows are going to look pretty perfect if you're doing them monthly or even every couple months or something. Like it's going to be more efficient.
Yeah, that's why I always try to say, sell those recurring jobs, even if mm-hmm. I don't care if it's house washing, roof cleaning, windows, I don't care what it is. There is an absolute benefit to them to just do maintenance things, and it can be cheaper. For me, the only difference in that was house washing generally was not any cheaper year over year. Mm-hmm. And it's not because the house wasn't dirty. The house might be fairly clean when we come back, but it's still the plant and property protection that we had to take, protecting your outlets and covering your ceiling fans and wiping down your ceilings and, all those sorts of things that cost us the time. That's where the issue was. So, we really couldn't save any time on house washes, but the rest of it, the maintenance cleanings are, to me, absolutely the way to go. And on large buildings, we could do it a lot cheaper if it was a semi-annual or annual treatments, because the first time you go, you got to use a hot mix on there, and then after that, it's a light mix and a rinse, and you're out of there. So
if you're doing, at this point in the way the industry is going, if you're doing house washing or building washing at all, and you're not doing window cleaning, you're missing out. Yeah. I mean, you just are. Like, the industry has moved in a direction where more people that are pressure washing are doing windows, and more people that are doing windows are doing pressure washing or soft washing, whichever. Right. But your customers are the same. Like, the people that are willing to pay for window cleaning are willing to pay for pressure washing, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. It's not smart to just not do window cleaning. If you're doing buildings,
leaving money on the table,
and houses, big time. I mean,
even if you sub it out, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, adding window cleaning into your pressure washing business is going to put such a bigger footprint into the market than just doing pressure washing. Mm-hmm. And I've told how many people this, and sometimes they get it and they get into it and they're like, yeah, you're right. And then sometimes they hold out and they hold out and they finally get into it. They're like, oh yeah, I really should have done this a long time ago. Once they realize, yeah, there's literally the same customers. They're going to get a lot more calls.
Well, and
The people that are looking for pressure washing and those or window cleaning, and that ends up turning into pressure washing jobs and vice versa.
and your margins can actually be better on window cleaning, plus liability is a lot lower.
Yeah, margins are good, especially if you train a guy to just go out and do windows and put him in a little Ford Ranger with a filtration system and a little tank, and I mean you can even put a tiny little pressure washer on there to where they can do this or that. But yeah, having a dedicated window guy is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Trevor, any parting thoughts for you?
No, just get into window cleaning if you're into pressure washing and vice versa. And if
And
you
remember not to drink the RODI water.
yeah, don't drink the RODI water. At least don't drink too much of it. If you have a little bit, you'll feel a little rumble in your stomach. Actually, we never really got into it. So the reason you don't want to drink purified water, 100% purified water, is because, well, like I said before, the water wants to get dirty and becomes aggressive, and so it's actually going to kill and eat the good bacteria that's in your stomach, which could, if you drank too much of it, it could actually kill you. It could make you very, very sick. Um, Now you'd have to drink a pretty decent amount. I'm not saying like gallons and gallons, but you have to drink um, a pretty big glass of it to make that big of an effect.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just taking, a sip or something, you'll feel an uncomfortable feeling in your stomach, which I think is what you experienced.
Yeah, I took a couple good gulps. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, and I didn't realize it until you had said that I was like, yeah, I bet that's why I had that stomach ache after the fact. So
Yeah.
there you go. All righty. Well, Trevor, I appreciate and hang out for a minute as we end this thing. And for everybody else, I appreciate y'all for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.